Loneliness isn't new. What's new is we have less idea than ever how to deal with it because we've replaced every ancient tool humans used to survive it with a screen. Here's what we lost. Think about the last time you felt genuinely lonely. Not just bored, not just quiet. That specific ache, the one that doesn't have a clear cause, that can show up in a crowded room just as easily as an empty apartment. The one that sends you to your phone not because there's something there, but because being without it feels worse. You scroll. Nothing helps. You put it down. Pick it up again. Maybe you send a few messages that don't really say what you're feeling. Maybe you post something, and afterwards the loneliness is still there. Maybe slightly muted, maybe exactly the same, maybe worse. And here's what's strange about that. You just used the most connected technology in human history. You had instant access to hundreds of people, and it didn't touch the thing you were actually trying to fix. That's not a coincidence. That's a mismatch between what the screen offers and what loneliness actually requires. And the only way to understand that mismatch is to go back, a long way back, and look at what humans actually did before any of this existed. For most of human history, the primary antidote to loneliness wasn't conversation. It was ritual. Shared, repeated, embodied ritual. The kind that happened in communities at predictable intervals and required your physical presence and your full participation. Religious services, seasonal ceremonies, communal meals that weren't optional, festivals tied to harvests or equinoxes or collective grief. These weren't just traditions. They were sophisticated psychological technology designed, whether anyone named them that or not, to dissolve the membrane between self and community at regular intervals. The research on this is striking. Studies on religious attendance consistently show that the loneliness-reducing effect has almost nothing to do with belief and almost everything to do with the embodied shared experience, the singing together, the physical gathering, the repetition of familiar words and gestures in a room full of people doing the same thing. Your nervous system cannot tell the difference between belonging and the felt experience of belonging. Ritual manufactured that felt experience reliably, collectively, and free of charge. We replaced it with content. It is not the same thing. Do you have any ritual in your life right now? Anything repeated, shared, that gets you out of your own head and into something bigger, even something small? Tell me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what that looks like in 2026. Here's something that sounds almost absurd to say out loud. For most of human history, people were lonely less often in part because they were doing physical work next to other people for most of the day. Not talking. Not bonding over shared interests, just present, side by side, hands occupied. The conversation that happened was incidental, low stakes, easy. You weren't performing. You weren't managing an impression. You were just two people shelling beans or fixing a fence or hauling something, and the proximity alone was doing quiet neurological work. Psychologists call this side-by-side connection, and it turns out to be one of the most effective forms of human bonding there is, especially for people who find direct emotional conversation difficult or exhausting. We are deeply social animals who are not fundamentally designed for face-to-face intense emotional interaction as our primary mode of relating. We are designed for shared presence, physical coexistence, doing things together in the same space over time. Remote work, solo commutes, apartments, desk jobs, delivery, everything. The modern world has systematically eliminated almost every structure that used to provide this for free, without anyone deciding to remove it. It just disappeared as a side effect of progress. This one is the hardest to hear. Before screens, when loneliness arrived, people had to sit with it. Not because they were stronger or more enlightened, because there was nowhere else to go. The distraction options were limited. Evening came, the noise of the day stopped, and there you were, alone with the feeling. And the counterintuitive thing that happened repeatedly across centuries of human experience, documented in letters, diaries, philosophical writing, religious contemplation, is that sitting with loneliness, without trying to immediately escape it, often led somewhere. To reflection, to creativity, to prayer or journaling or letter writing, which is to say, to meaning-making. The loneliness became material, something to be processed, transformed, or at minimum honestly felt, and then released. We have lost almost all tolerance for that process, not because we're weaker than previous generations. Because we carry a portal to infinite distraction in our pocket, and the average time before we reach for it, when discomfort arrives, is measured in seconds. We are outsourcing the processing of loneliness to an algorithm that profits from keeping us in it. The sum of all of this is something significant. Previous generations had structures that handled loneliness without requiring individual willpower to access them. You didn't have to decide to connect. The community meal, the shared labor, the religious gathering, the front porch, it was built into the architecture of daily life. What we have instead is optional, on-demand, algorithmically mediated contact, which means the loneliness is now entirely your responsibility to manage, in a world that profits from you managing it badly, with tools that are specifically designed to simulate connection without delivering it. That's not an accident. And it's not a personal failure. It is a structural problem being experienced as a private one, which is exactly why it feels so shameful and so hard to name. The loneliness epidemic isn't happening because people stopped caring about each other. It's happening because the invisible architecture that used to hold people together, without anyone thinking about it, without anyone choosing it, without anyone even noticing it was doing the work, quietly collapsed. And we handed everyone a phone and called it connection. You cannot rebuild the village, but you can understand what the village was actually doing and reverse engineer some of it deliberately. Find a ritual and protect it. It doesn't have to be religious. It has to be repeated, embodied, and shared. A weekly dinner you show up to. A run you do with someone. A class where you see the same people every week. The repetition is the point. That's what builds the felt sense of belonging your nervous system is actually looking for. Pursue side by side over face to face. If direct emotional conversation feels hard or exhausting, stop forcing it as your primary mode of connection. Find things to do with people, physical things, low-stakes things. Walk with someone. Cook with someone. The relationship will build in the background, the way it was always supposed to. Let loneliness last 10 more minutes. Before you reach for the phone the next time that feeling arrives, wait. Not indefinitely, just 10 minutes. See what the feeling is actually trying to tell you. See if something surfaces, a person you want to reach out to, an honest thought you've been avoiding, a need you haven't named. The discomfort has information in it. Let it speak before you silence it. Humans have been lonely for as long as there have been humans. It is not a modern invention, and it is not a personal weakness. What's modern is the removal of every structure that used to absorb it, and the replacement of those structures with tools that stimulate the feeling of connection while leaving the underlying hunger completely untouched. The ancient tools weren't complicated. They were just physical, repeated, and real, and most of them are still available to us. They're just no longer automatic, which means they now require something previous generations never had to spend: a conscious choice. If this reframed something you've been carrying, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe if you want more. Every week, we go into the psychology behind the things people feel but can't quite put into words. And leave a comment with this: what's one thing, pre-phone, pre-social media, that you think actually helped people feel less alone? History is full of answers we've stopped looking at. See you next week.